Hello and welcome to the March 4th edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I'm Mike Hogan in the DRF studios, and I'm joined via Skype for the whole show today by Jonathon Kinchen. Welcome, Jonathon.
What's up? I wish I was still in New York, but the weather's a little bit warmer here, so I'll make it work.
Yeah, we got a little snow this morning. It's supposed to clear up, but it's just some light flurries, so you're probably a little cozier where you are. Speaking of being cozy, we don't have Pete today. He's in Mexico. He was a little too busy to join us, but we'll have him back at least via Skype next week. He'll be in Southern California for a couple weeks, and then back in the studios towards the end of the month. But yeah, we're just you and me, and then we got some. I'm excited. We got some guests. Some buddies of yours are joining us today, huh?
Yeah, no, it's my friend Jenkins qualified on BC Qualify last weekend for the BC. And then I think we're going to start the show with good friend Travis Stone, who is going to be calling the Gotham this weekend and getting kind of geared up for Derby season and calling his second Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, it's exciting. So I've only interacted with both of them on Twitter. I've never met them in person or talked to them in person. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good show. We're going to do a few things today with Travis. We're going to talk, of course, Gotham, which he's going to be calling on Saturday. We're also going to redboard. We did this last week. We redboarded the 2005 Derby. Today we're going to redboard the 2007 Derby. It was a good one. We'll see if we can get Travis's thoughts on that one as well in preparation for calling, as you mentioned, his second Kentucky Derby this year. And then later we'll talk with Jack and we'll go over 4 stakes races for the weekend. A couple at Aqueduct, one at Gulfstream, and one at Fairgrounds, the 4 that are being used on Public Handicapper. Hopefully Jack has some interesting opinions on those. But yeah, in the meantime, you've been helping out on the tournaments, DRF tournaments realm, right? You know, we had, I don't know if you listened to our buddy Ruben Mendez on Wednesday's show. But he was the guy that won the free entry to NHC Qualify last week and then earned a seat to NHC next year.
Yeah, no, it's really awesome. I've been following Pete's blog where he was talking about it, and that's really cool that, you know, the guy, obviously he's been trying. It showed that he's been kind of trying a little bit. I think in Pete's first paper he said, like, before the recession he was trying a lot more, and then after the recession he slowed down on trying to qualify for the NHC. So I saw his daughter dancing on Twitter, excited that he qualified, so that's pretty awesome. I remember the first time I qualified, which wasn't that long ago, but it was a pretty exciting deal, and so good for him. That's really fun.
Well, we have some more chances this weekend, right? Well, you know the specifics of some of the contests on Saturday and Sunday? Yeah,
I'm pretty sure there's an NHC qualify on Saturday, and then there's also the DRF qualify for the Santa Anita Gulfstream Ultimate Betting Challenge. I think they're going to do those on Saturday and Sunday. It's really cool. It's a little bit more expensive. They have the entry fee's $250, but they give away with that number, the ratio is better. So I think it's like 1 in 23 get a seat, which is a little bit easier to overcome than some of the other numbers that they can be at times. So that's a really cool format. Those sold out both times they did them 2 weeks ago. So that'll be fun. And then round 1 for BC Qualify is on Sunday, which is my favorite format, where it's they have 3 round 1s, where if you make it in the top 10% of those, then you advance to round 2. And in round 2, I think they give up to 8 seats away. So pretty busy weekend. I think Saturday and Sunday both could get you going. And I love playing 2 at a time, which I did a lot last year. I'll play NHC Qualify and DRF Qualify because, like at the racetrack, if you have a good day, you want to try to make them pay for it. So if there's nothing worse than doing well on one and not participating in another. So
right. Well, that's kind of the key. Regardless of whether you're playing in a contest or you're betting at the windows, you know that many times you're not going to have a good day, or you're going to have good opinions that don't necessarily lead to winners. And so when you do have those good opinions that lead to winners, you need to be sure to capitalize on it, because you may go a few weeks without having that again.
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the hardest things that it took, for me to learn, and I've been trying to get better at that. Is when you're right, you have to make money, because you're going to be wrong more than you're right, and you have to be able to kind of help pay for that the times you're not going to be right, or unlucky at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I should also mention, I've been neglected to mention, of course, our sponsor, DRF Bets. If you're watching on YouTube, Mike, our producer, had shown the promo. Go to drfbets.com/200 you can get $200 in free money. You just deposit $150, bet it in the first day, and you get an extra $50 on top of $150 match. Okay, so we're having a little trouble getting Travis on the line. So let's go ahead and Mike will continue to try and connect him. Let's go ahead and take a look at this 2007 Derby while we try and get Travis on the line. You've got the PPs for it. You've also got the chart for it, Jonathan. I know you were a bit of a fan at the time, but you probably weren't as involved as a horse player in 2007. So looking at these PPs fresh, what jumps out at you?
Golly, Curlin was really good, wasn't he? I mean, in my Derby lifetime, which I would say is, I mean, obviously I participated in this Derby, but I wasn't involved in racing like I am now, obviously. But, I hadn't really seen a horse that was like this impressive. I mean, I guess American Pharoah was pretty darn impressive, but this is by 12, by 5, by 10, and that's what stood out the first time I flipped through it. And then this was a little bit different because there was some than the last Derby we did. Hard Spun, a speed horse. Liquidity was a speed horse. Teufelsberg didn't go that fast, but was a speed horse. So that kind of caught my attention. I still don't know if I would have landed on Street Sense just because I tend to try to stay away from closers, especially in a race like the Derby when there's 20 horses and lots of opportunities for trouble. Obviously, we know in hindsight that Street Sense didn't find any of that trouble, but I think I would have. I mean, as chalky as I can be at times, I think I would have landed on. Curlin, but I was interested. A horse that I would have fell for that didn't run very well was Dominican. He closed into that 51.5 at Keeneland on the Poly, and that's the kind of trip that I would imagine he was pretty against it that day. With the pace being that slow, I think they went 116. It was 3/4 of 116. I ought to try to play a horse like that to improve off of that performance. I'm sure he was a pretty big number as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chart right now. Dominican ended up going off. It's funny, he beat Street Sense, who went off as your 9-2 favorite, just a tick below 5-1. Dominican had beat him in that prior start that you mentioned in the Bluegrass. He was just a tick below 25-1. So you would have been getting about 5 times the value on Dominican as on Street Sense, and they basically ran the same race in the prior start. My background, I think I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, my background was I got involved in horse racing when I was a kid with my grandfather, early 80s, late 70s, reading the racing forum at the OTB, going to Saratoga. And I followed it for years. I kind of, I would bet now and then. I kind of really got back into racing and became a really big fan a couple years before. It was really the 2005 Derby was the first one I was really focused on it. So by 2007, I was entrenched with it. I had been dating my now wife for a couple years. She and I would go to the track all the time. We would talk about, and I remember looking at these PPs, it brings it all back. I remember exactly the discussions we were having at the time. And it's funny you mentioned Curlin because he just jumped out of nowhere. In February, he was a maiden. Debuts at Gulfstream, runs away with it, gets sold to Stone Street Stables and Just Jackson, moves to the Steve Asmussen barn, runs away in the Rebel, just crushes the field in the Arkansas Derby. And it was this discussion wow, this could be a monster horse. And, the Curse of Apollo and all of that stuff in there. It was, maybe he's the one to finally win and beat that curse. And I felt like, what I said to my wife at the time was, if this were $1 million claiming race, I know who I'd claim if I had the $1 million. Curlin is the horse you want to own. Curlin is probably the best horse in the race. I just had my concerns about whether or not he could do it in his 4th career start against 19 other horses and, in the Kentucky Derby. So, and I actually I loved Street Sense. because he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. It was at Churchill, huge effort there, ran away and hid, certainly closed into somewhat of a solid pace, but already showed that he loved the track. And then he had 2 efforts after a little bit of a break, 2 efforts in this 3-year-old year. And even though he only nosed out any given Saturday in one and lost by a nose to Dominican in the other, I just kind of felt like he was sitting on a huge race on a track that he'd already shown that he liked. So the way I played the race, and you mentioned all the speed, we saw horses like Hardspun, I thought was a speed horse. I wasn't sure he wanted the distance. Liquidity, speed horse. Teufelsberg was a sprinter. I thought he'd go. There was some other ones on the outside. I think Stormello was another I thought would go. I thought this was going to be a hot pace. I thought this was going to be another race like the 2005 Derby. And so my whole wagering was keying exactas and tries with Street Sense on top over Curlin and tossing Hardspun completely. So I was almost right. Hardspun proved he was a really good horse and was able to keep that speed and carry it a good distance. But at least I had a little bit of a win bet. I mean, 9-2 is a decent price on Street Sense. I just felt like he was the most likely winner, and I tried to key around. I never would have had the Super. There was no way I was having I'm a Wild and Crazy Guy for 4th.
That's a hard horse to have, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I just when you look at it, it's like, what was his excuse? What was his excuse in the Florida Derby? They had a fast pace to close into. I guess, so that's just the type of horse that if he beats me and I lose on that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic that in the Florida Derby he was 37-1. In the Kentucky Derby, he was 28-1. So he runs 6th out of 9 in the Florida Derby, and then when he runs against 19 horses after coming off a 6th-place finish, he's bet even harder. It's crazy. Anyway, do we have Mr. Travis Stone? Travis, you on?
I'm here.
All right, Travis, welcome to the podcast, DRF Players Podcast. This is Mike Hogan. You're on with your buddy, Jonathon Kinchen.
Hey, T-Stone. I'm good.
I think your audio might be off, Travis. Can you boost it up a little? It's I think your mic is off. So we want to hear those dulcet tones that we hear at both Churchill Downs and Aqueduct. We want to hear it coming nice and loud.
Hold on.
All right, there we go. That's it.
Can you hear me?
Welcome. We can hear you. We're Jonathon and I are in the middle of redboarding the 2007 Derby. Let's step back a bit now that you're on the podcast. Give us just the 2 minutes of your background in racing. Of course, we know you're a race caller. How'd you get interested in racing? How'd you get involved? How'd you become a race caller?
I grew up in upstate New York, a town called Strewn Lake, which is about an hour north of Saratoga. And we took many trips to the spa when I was a kid, and I just fell in love with the game and would come home and play horse racing and would call the races. And one thing led to another. Went to college for communications and started calling races right after that. So I've been very lucky. I spent 8 years in Louisiana, went to Monmouth Park for a year, in New York in the winter, and Churchill Downs in the summer. So a lot of fun.
That's great. And you'll be calling your second Kentucky Derby this year.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like, your first Kentucky Derby, you call the Kentucky Derby of the first Triple Crown winner in your lifetime, right?
Yeah, hard to believe. Didn't think it would be that, it'd play out that way after the race. It was, I'd never been to the Derby before, so it was my first trip to the Derby. So that was kind of an experience in and of itself. And I created a plan, like a game plan and approach for calling the race, and just focused and stuck to it. And luckily for me, as far as Derby goes, it wasn't that crazy. It was a fairly formful race. It didn't do much position changing, so I was lucky on that front. And what I'll tell you, what really helped was I had a bunch of friends there that week. Jonathon was there that week. My buddy Nick was there, who Jonathon knows as well. And that really helped create some normalcy throughout the entire process. So it was a lot of fun. Really excited to go back and do it again this year.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, before we move on and talk about the Gotham, which you're going to be calling on Saturday, Do you want to talk about the 2007 Derby? We're in the middle of redboarding it. Jonathan and I gave our thoughts. Have you taken a look at the PPs fresh? I don't know if you're familiar with the segment that we're going to do every week leading up to the Derby this year.
I'll say this. One is I went to the 2006 Breeders' Cup at Churchill Downs with a friend of mine, Mark Midland, and we were sitting on the clubhouse turn for the juvenile, and we all liked Street Sense that day because he made a big wide middle move at Keeneland, and that was the Breeders' Futurity. Is that what it's called? The prep race they have there.
Yeah.
And so we were totally tuned into Street Sense from that day on, and I love Street Sense in the Derby. The problem was I hated Hard Spun. I did not think Hard Spun was a good play, and so everything that I bet in that race went up in smoke when he held on for second. That was frustrating.
You may have joined just a second after I said almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah, very frustrating. I knew it. So, he turned for home, and it looked like Hard Spun might try and win, but there was never a moment where he wasn't going to hold on for a second. So it was sort of a very exciting and then anticlimactic stretch drive all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I said before you joined was going into the race, I knew Curlin was probably the horse that I wanted to own going forward. I just wasn't sure whether or not he was going to be ready in his fourth career start. So I used him underneath. I thought he may just be good enough on raw talent to hit the board, and of course he finished third. But yeah, I was all about Street Sense on top and playing Hard Spun out, and you know how that worked out.
All right, well.
Did you at least have a few bucks on him to win?
I think I did, but I don't like to play win in the Derby because the trifecta and the superfecta even they pay so huge. That's where you go for the value,
Sure.
Oh well.
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do? Well, hopefully this year you'll take it all down, as well as call an amazing race. But looking ahead to tomorrow, the Gotham. It's a race that we'll be covering shortly when your buddy Jack Jenkins joins us. But as a race caller, also as a handicapper, what is your approach to preparing for a race like this? And do you have any thoughts as to who the most likely winner is or how the race is likely to play out? All races are puzzles. I think this is a pretty particular puzzle. There is in terms of like who's going to go to the lead, I don't know, right? Because there's like 3 or 4 that could go if they want to go. Right.
I do think just by the nature of the way that Cassie Barnes raced their horses on dirt, I do think Conquest McGee is going to be close. And so I'm sort of anticipating from a race calling perspective him to break alertly and try and get a forward spot. And I think the real question for the run to the first turn is who else goes, who decides to take back, and what does that do to everybody else? A horse like Shagaf, I think, has drawn pretty poorly the way this race projects to be run, because unless they want to go forward with him right off the mark, he could be shuffled back pretty quickly toward the inside. And as the probable favorite, I'll be looking for something like that to happen too. The other thing I'm looking for going to the first turn is Adventist, who I think is a very talented racehorse, but was very green and a little bit inexperienced last time in his first time going through turns and long and everything. And it was unsettled in the early going. So that'll be another, sort of point of observation in the first couple of furlongs to see how he does with that race under his belt, because I do think he's talented enough to make some noise in here. But it's very murky in terms of pace. I really have no idea who's going to win. I think there's literally 3 to 5 of them you can make a case for.
Oh, for sure. Maybe even more. And I know Mo Power is cross-entered in the allowance race on Sunday. And I haven't looked.
The Gotham. I think he's scratching. Dave Brenning just tweeted out because of a rule about back-to-back entry days in New York, he has to scratch tomorrow and run on Sunday.
Oh, okay. Good info. I hadn't even checked that yet. But I just thought it was notable that Johnny V was in theory taking the trip to ride him there, while Javier was not taking the trip to ride Rally Cry. But
right.
I guess we scratched that. We look for him on Sunday against, among others, Matt King Cole,
right.
who, if he runs well, could very well show up in the Wood probably next time, I would imagine.
Sure, absolutely, yeah, no doubt.
All right. Well, do you have any others? The other card or the other race we're going to discuss from Aqueduct tomorrow with Jack is the 7th race, the Heavenly Prize. Another race that could have a little bit of a murky pace scenario here. 7 fillies and mares lined up. An interesting betting race, even though it's a small field. Callie Starr, at least on the morning line, is a bit of a standout. But I think she's vulnerable. What's your take on that race?
I'll say one thing, too, in calling races this winter and watching New York racing throughout the year. Ortiz Jr. is not exactly an aggressive rider out of the gate, and he's on Callie Starr. He likes to sort of sit that, pocket, pull back off the pace a little bit type ride. So I don't really see him gunning from the gate too often, and I think that could be a problem for her because, like you said, the pace is very murky here. I don't know who's going to set the pace in this race. This is another one of those rider-type races. In terms of overall perspectives, it's too bad that we don't see Kendrick Carmouche with a horse with a bit of tactical speed in a race like this because he has been riding so aggressive here this winter and putting horses in the game early. It just makes this race that much more difficult, and it feels like if you're playing the late pick 4 tomorrow, you probably got to use a couple of them just to even feel okay about it. And if not, I don't want to say buy the race, but come close to it because it's that competitive.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of different ways you can go in here, and it'll be interesting to have a deeper discussion once Jack joins as well. But yeah, it should be a fun card. Should be a fun series of races. That late pick 4, as you mentioned, could be somewhat wide open and potentially a very nice payoff if you're able to take it down. So we only have a couple more minutes before we bring Jack on. Any other thoughts and any other ideas for playing tomorrow's card or tips or horses that you're looking forward to?
I just want to see how Sunny Ridge does because I think he's a very talented horse, and I thought he ran pretty well last time. And I do think Jason Service is smart and cagey enough to have him, at 85% or 90% first off the bench as the 3-year-old debut. And I would expect him to move forward here. And I'm hopeful that he has a good race and that they start to consider a race like the Kentucky Derby. I know they're sort of talking Preakness and Haskell combos, which I think is silly. He's talented enough to be competitive in this crop. This crop is not that strong right now. The top layer is fairly competitive. It doesn't take a big number to get there. I mean, right now, if you told me the Derby buyer figure was going to be in the triple digits, I wouldn't believe it. And so if you can get close to the 90s, I think you have to give it a shot. And I think Sunny Ridge is one of those types that can take a step forward. So I want to see how he does tomorrow. And I want to see how Adventus does tomorrow because I think he's also very talented. So it's just, it's just a great race. There's a lot going on. It'll be a lot of fun.
It is.
Hey,
and I think, go ahead, Jonathan.
Do you think the morning line might be a little bit tricky with, don't you think Conquest Big E will go off shorter than Sunny Ridge?
I don't think so. I just think they're going to respect Sunny Ridge's withers form on paper a little bit more. And as you see time and time again here with horses that Chad Brown trains, they get overbet almost always. So Shagoff is going to unnecessarily take a lot of money as well. And obviously he's got a shot too. I don't want to discount him, but he is going to be overbet, I think, relative to his true chances. I think of all of the core main contenders, I think you could see Conquest Big E go off the highest price of them all. His speed figures don't exactly stack up, and there's probably a little bit of concern that he wasn't that good last time and he can't rebound this time. I think you're going to get some value on him. And hey, look at Jose Ortiz is aggressive. He's going to put him in the game early. And as you know, as we both were friendly with Norm Cassidy, they like to have their horses forwardly placed. I'd expect them to be forward too.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think he may be of those 4 you mentioned. I'm assuming you're thinking of Rally Cry in there as well. I think Conquest Big E might be the best value of the 4, partly because everybody that was looking at the last race between Shagoff and Rally Cry, they were almost the same. They were essentially co-favorites at 4 to 5, 90 cents on the dollar. Rally Cry had just a horrendous trip in there. And any trip handicappers, I think, are going to be all over him. Which isn't to say he's not good enough to win. I think those 2 may get the most attention. I think even a horse like Sunny Ridge, even with that Withers form, he may be overlooked a little bit.
Yeah, you might be right. You're first off, you're definitely right in the Rally Cry. He'll be overbet based on that trip because people will just look at that comment line and assume that he did have some legitimate trouble. Sunny Ridge could be a little bit overlooked too. I feel like the 92 buyer 2 back in the jackpot is going to sort of jump off to everybody. And he ran well last time. He was wide both turns, and I thought Vorticity ran a pretty game race. I think he's talented too. I think he could make some noise in some of the shorter 3-year-old races down the road. So I ultimately think that they'll embrace Sunny Ridge a little bit more than some of these others. And Rally Cry would be some value, but I definitely think the value will be conquest big.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, going back to the morning line, I would imagine the one, and I think you've indicated that you like him a little bit, the one that you're going to get some value on relative to the morning line is Adventist. I don't think he's going to be near that 4-1.
I agree. I think the one thing, and Jonathan and my friend Nick made a comment to me the other night. He goes, the Withers, the way they finish, they sort of clump together, and he says, I don't really want anybody out of there. My counter to him was, that was that horse's first time going 2 turns, his first time going long, his first time against winners. His debut was super impressive. He's talented. And he ran really well last year. He was ranking wide into the first turn and never really settled until they hit the stretch. And Richard McGlory came down to our office afterwards. Like, that horse is pretty good. That was a lot to ask of him today, and he ran pretty well. So, this is just a theme of the Gotham, right? A bunch of horses with some upside and some question marks at the same time. And it'll just be a really fun race. I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, another interesting piece of the puzzle.
Which one are you nervous about pronouncing?
I have my notes on Lauban, but I have to make sure it's Lauban and not Lauban. I might have to text Michael and Frank. They both called him out west. And I do know that I was talking to Andy a little bit, Andy Serling, and he's trying to make a case for him too. That just shows you the depth and competitiveness of it. It'll be a lot of fun.
Well, yesterday I did a webinar rather with Randy Moss, and he made a case for Lauban, however you say it, in that race. Let's hope you say it correctly, because we certainly don't want, not to say he's going to be the Derby winner, but we don't want a case like we had of Barbaro in his early races being called Barbaro.
Yeah. When I came on this podcast, I didn't think I was going to get these bad thoughts planted in my head and cause some sort of like mid-backstretch screw-up of a horse's name. This is not part of the deal.
Sorry. Well, let's try not to take your eye off the ball.
We'll be fine. I think it's Lauban, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. We got time. We got a day.
I think you're right. I think you could really, and we almost have on here, made a case for every one of the horses. So I'll be interested to see the race. I don't know if I'll be betting the race. I probably won't, but obviously as a prep for the Kentucky Derby, I think a lot of things are going to be answered tomorrow. Thank you for joining the podcast, and I wish you the best of luck, not just tomorrow, but as you move forward to call your second Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it, and say hello to Jack for me.
Will do. All right, thanks, Travis.
Take care.
All right, Jonathan, we got a few minutes before we get Jack on the line. I should mention we maybe gave the DRF Bets offer the short shrift, drfbets.com/200 to sign up and get a free $200 sign-up bonus. It's one of the best deals in racing right now, and you get also, of course, DRF free PPs and free DRF Plus with just $300 wagered in a calendar month. Jonathan, the way you bet $300 in a race, right?
Well, it depends. It depends on how things are going. But, I've been known to do that from time to time.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We know we're going to cover 4 of the stakes races. Let's just even broaden it. We got a couple minutes before Jack joins. Any other, on any card tomorrow, Aqueduct, Gulfstream, Fairgrounds, even Santa Anita, which we're not going to talk about, any horse you're looking particularly interested in betting?
Oh my gosh, I've got PPs all over the place. I'm gonna play in the Lone Star Park tournament tomorrow.
Nice.
I'm in Dallas visiting my dad again, and they have a free tournament tomorrow. I think it's actually too late to sign up, but you can sign up for the next one. But it's a really cool. It's an NHC qualifier. You play in this one, and then it leads to another one where you actually can get an NHC seat. But long story short, there's like 5 racetracks. I've just been like doing all my like pre kind of PP work where we all do our little notes in the PPs, and I blasted through the races that I had to look at today. I can't think of anything specific that I was wanting to look at. There's just the Gulfstream Park Handicap is this weekend, right? With Stanford,
yes.
It's a knockout. Yeah,
or as I like to refer to it, the Todd Pletcher Invitational.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Blofeld was like about to be retired. I mean, he has not run, and he's running again. So hopefully he'll take some money, but I doubt he will. I bet It's a Knockout last time, and he didn't run very well. I'll be interested to look at that race and kind of play around with it a little bit. But other than that, I'm just going to try to focus on trying to find some winners for this tournament.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's interesting that you say you're going to be joining this free tournament that's a feeder to an NHC tournament. As the reigning NHC Tour winner, I would think that you wouldn't have time for these free little feeders. You know, you've got bigger things and bigger fish to fry than competing against newbies that want to buy in for, don't even buy in at all. So if I were going to that Lone Star one for free, I would think, oh, I'm at least safe from running into any of the big sharks like Jonathon Kinchen. But no.
Well, those are the fun ones, man. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I can't tell you how excited I am. It's like getting close to Christmas for me with the $4,500 buy-in tournament at the Ultimate Betting Challenge at Santa Anita. But these are fun too. I mean, the different formats are kind of what make the tour so much fun, is being able to do different things and different types of formats. So, I played in a $100 live bankroll tournament at Monmouth last weekend. So, yeah, and then the other thing is I learned last year is you have to be a little strategic about picking your spots. Last year I would go to events that had 40 people in them because they were bigger money. But for the tour points, that doesn't always help. Sometimes you want to be in a field that's big and try to score in there because you get a lot more points for that. So that's kind of my angle here. And plus, I'm in town, and the guys at Lone Star have been really good. My whole life I've always gone there. So to go up and hang out there and support their tournament's always fun.
That's great. Sounds like it's a lot of fun. Real quick before we get Jack on, you've probably seen at least some of the tweets and maybe read the article. Have you seen anything about this new Pace Ace stuff that's now a part of the DRF PPs?
I haven't looked at it yet. Well, I haven't seen it, but Jack sent me a text message actually yesterday with a screenshot of it. So yeah. I haven't played with it because is it in Formulator or just in the Classic PPs?
It's not in Formulator yet. It's in Classic PPs. It's in the paper. It'll be in Formulator soon, next few weeks or so. But it's the interesting thing about it, and the thing that I find that it's unlike anything else, is it is looking at pace somewhat, generally, at least first, independent of fractional times. So it is looking at pace coming into a race saying, we expect this to be a race with a fast pace based on the running styles of the horses. And then afterwards, it validates whether or not that was the case. If all the horses that were early or on the lead early ended up towards the back of the field late, it indicates it as a hot pace. And conversely, if it says this appears to be a slow pace on paper, plays out as such, it lists it as a slow pace. So it doesn't look at it like it went 22 and 4, so that it has to be a hot pace. If the timer malfunctions, it still works, which is kind of interesting to me.
Oh, that's cool.
Anyway, we have Jack on. Welcome, Jack.
Good to be here.
Thank you for joining the DRF Players Podcast. It's your first time. I'm Mike Hogan. You know Jonathon Kinchen, of course.
Right so.
Well, nice to meet you. Nice to have you on the podcast. We had your buddy Travis Stone on. We talked to him a little bit about the Aqueduct card tomorrow, in particular the Gotham and the Heavenly Prize. We'll go over those races as well with you, get your opinions on them. But before we do, why don't you spend a couple minutes and just talk about your background, what got you into horse racing, interested in playing the races, and how did you get the bug the first time?
Well, we purchased a pharmacy here in our small town that me and my wife both grew up in, and the gentleman we purchased the store from, his weekend passion was going to Kentucky Downs for simulcasting and to bet the races. So he started dragging me along, I think, to have someone to drive for him. So I started going and being a sports guy like I am, a sports junkie, I fell in love with it immediately and haven't looked back. I really believe it's the greatest sport played.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, so how long ago was that?
That was my first trip for simulcasting was the 2004 Breeders' Cup.
Okay. So what, 12 years now, almost 12 years now. Before you joined, we were redboarding the 2007 Derby, looking at the PPs fresh, trying to figure out, who's going to get the lead, who's going to win. Both Travis and I were right on in one sense, and we were both right on street sense. We were wrong on hard spun because we tossed him out of our tries in exactas.
Yeah.
What was your approach to that race?
Travis and I talked about that yesterday. We kind of had the same. It was funny. We didn't even know each other then, but we had the same opinion.
Yeah.
I really like street sense. I thought the pace would be too taxing for hard spun. I really spent a lot of my money tying up street sense in any given Saturday. I actually made the biggest win bet at the time that I'd ever made, and I made a $200 win bet on street sense. So I look back at the 2007 Derby as a pretty fond memory.
Nice. Well, you almost got there. If you were right about hard spun, and any given Saturday had a little bit of a trip in the Derby, and my assessment was that Curlin might be the best horse in the race, but I didn't think he was ready to win, so I tried to use him underneath.
I didn't like Curlin either. I didn't think he was ready for it yet, but he proved me wrong in the Preakness.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to some more current racing. We got 4 races to cover for tomorrow. We're going to start at Aqueduct with the 7th race. It's 3:50 p.m. Eastern Time. It's the third running of the Heavenly Prize. It's a short field of 7 fillies and mares. But it's an interesting race because this was one where it was kind of hard to figure out how it's going to be run, who's going to be on the lead, what the value is going to be. I had a hard time even figuring out a fair price on any of these horses. So you're our guest. We'll let you start. What do you think, Jack? How'd you see this race playing out?
Well, it's interesting they're putting the blinkers back on Mei Ling, so maybe they're trying to wake her up a little bit. House Rules looks really well spotted to me. She's coming off of a bullet work, so you hope that she gets back to her more tactical running style, and hopefully drawing the 3 that she can set maybe right off Mei Ling and set a really good trip in here. She's running well fresh in the past, so I'm kind of leaning toward her in here.
Yeah, I think you're right. At least from a class standpoint, I think she's probably the best one in the race. Maybe include Betty is kind of right up there, but I think just her running style at Aqueduct is probably going to be up against it a little bit. And if she's anywhere near the 3-1 morning line, I don't know if I'm going to be playing any multi-race wagers, but I would look to try and beat her at least on the win end. And, I think Cali Star is your 8-5 morning line favorite. I guess she can win, but I don't think she's any lock. And I guess if you believe the Beyer speed figures, she comes in with the best recent races. But I think you're right. For me, it goes through 2 horses. House Rules is probably the best one. Whether or not she's ready and whether or not she gets the trip and whether or not she takes to Aqueduct, it tends to favor more forwardly placed horses when her best running has kind of been a little bit off the pace. The other one that was interesting to me was one that doesn't have the back class, but I think has gotten good right now and I think could very well sit a good trip, and that's number 5, Say 3 Hail Marys. I think she might end up, I think you're right that Mei Ling is going to be forwardly placed with the blinkers on, but I think Say 3 Hail Marys is just coming into the race nicely off of 4 strong efforts, likes the inner track, a bullet work since the last race shows that she's really on the top of her toes, and I think she's going to be a good price in here. So I probably try and take a shot and take down a nice payout by leaning on those 2.
I completely agree. I wrote down 3, 5, and 6. I think Say 3 Hail Marys could absolutely juice up the exotics in here. She seems like a horse for course with the Aqueduct in her.
Yeah. All right, Jonathan, what was your take?
Yeah, this is one of those weird races where the board is going to make a huge difference to me, especially for in situations like tournaments. But it feels like we've all said that Callie Star like doesn't have to win. So it feels like she's going to drift up from 8 to 5, and if she does that, I think you might be able to find a little value. I think she's going to get a great trip sitting outside. I think it's pretty obvious that Mei Ling's going to go to the front. She's drawn inside, adding blinkers. She's shown obviously shown some speed in the past. Jose's on board. One of the tricky horses in here, and actually Jack and I texted about this horse, and I was like, no, I don't like her at all. And then I kind of thought about it again with Include Betty. You know, I was really excited. You know, I got to meet Aaron Greider this spring out at Santa Anita, and he had kind of told us he was thinking about coming out to New York. And I was excited because I felt like his California style of riding horses aggressively and putting them into the race was going to benefit him when we watched the entire summer of a lot of guys in New York grabbing. And I thought he was going to do really well. And obviously Include Betty doesn't have much speed early, but something's telling me she's going to be a little bit more involved. Off a long break, she might be a little bit fresh. And I think she might be a little bit closer. And I think she might be just classier than these. And so she's one that if she gets ignored on the board, I would be interested in. I want nothing to do with her at 3-1. But if she's one of those horses that just kind of gets ignored and creeps up to 5-1 or something because these other horses are getting bet, she'd be one that I might consider, at least one that I wouldn't ignore underneath. Because she's the type of horse that your opinion might be right, but she's going to run second and you could be wrong.
Right, I hear you. All right, let's move on to the 9th race at Aqueduct tomorrow. It's the Gotham. It's the big race of the weekend, at least in terms of the Derby preps go. I think it's the only real Derby prep this weekend. At least the only one that will get any points for any of the contenders. We talked about it a little bit with Travis. So Jack, normally we don't make a guest start fresh twice. But since you haven't really chimed in yet on this one, we'll put you on the spot again. Where are you thinking in the Gotham here?
Well, I saw Dave Greening's tweet this morning, just a few minutes ago, where he says that looks like Mo Power is going to have to scratch. So he's out.
Right. So 7 horses now.
He's 7 horse. I think from the outside post, I really see Rally Cry, trying to establish the lead from there. So, Todd Pletcher, on the lead could be dangerous. I'm kind of leaning Conquest Big E. He's kind of been a buzz horse ever since his, first race against Brody's Cause, where he looked best in there. Mm-hmm. He went into the Breeders' Cup Juvie with a lot of buzz behind him, and I think this is a pretty good spot for him, coming second off the layoff for Cassie. So I'm kind of leaning toward him on the win end. Sunny Ridge is a really nice, classy horse who should set a good trip once again. And then Shaggoff, who for Chad Brown, who looks like he could go favored.
Yeah. So Jonathan, that kind of sets it up for you. I know Conquest Big E was one that you were leaning on heavily in the Breeders' Cup, and had he won, you may very well have taken down the BC, if I remember correctly. Are you still married to him?
Yeah, I've told you guys before, and Jack knows too, I sign contracts that I have to bet these horses all the time. I can't control myself, but
no divorce papers filed yet?
No, well, not yet. So the thing about Conquest Big E is I just, when you follow these horses for a long time, you start to pick up stories about them and hear things about them, and it kind of sticks with you. And I know one of the biggest issues that he's had, I've heard from different clockers, and I even heard Norm talk about it before, was just, he's just a headstrong colt, and trying to get him to relax has always been something they've been working on because, he's a tappet. So, we've all heard things about tappets, but I think it's kind of important to realize that last race, he didn't run well, and he did seem to relax a little bit, but it feels like they went really slow, and that's not something he wants to do. And I feel like if he can get a little bit more to run at, get a little bit more pace to run at, kind of find his stride a little bit, I think that's something he can excel at. So, look, Jack picked him. I like him. I feel like he's always kind of got bet. I don't think he should have been 14-1 in the juvenile, and he was 14-1. He's always kind of got money, and I think that he'll get money again. That's kind of why I asked Travis his opinion with Sunny Ridge if he would go off shorter than Sunny Ridge, just being one of those weird horses that starts at 6-1 and creeps down to 7-2. But his price is going to matter to me a lot. If he gets overbet, then he's one I'll probably stay away from. But I'm going to look there, and then I'm also going to take a little peek at Shaggoff. Maybe if he goes ignored, which I don't see happening. We were in Vegas, and we were gonna bet a future on him at the win, and he was almost the same price as Mohaymen. So that was obviously he's obviously going to get some backing.
Right. Well, so let me ask you this, and Jack, you can chime in too. What do you guys think a fair price is on Conquest Big E?
I would think 7-2. I think he'll be in the 7-2 range. I kind of feel like I told Jonathan this morning. I kind of feel like they got the morning lines on the 3 and 6 reversed.
Yeah.
Adventist. I don't see Adventist being 4-1. I think you could possibly see 7 or 8-1 on him. I wasn't. He was green, and I don't know. His last race didn't do a lot for me, so I would definitely be trying to get him out of the trifecta.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, the same thing. 7-2. Obviously, depending on where I'm at, he's a horse that I'm going to use in the pick fours no matter what. Obviously, if I was looking to bet the horse to win, nothing lower than 7-2, and obviously the higher the better. But at 7-2, he's probably one I wouldn't play in a tournament, and if I'm playing in DRF qualifier, NHC qualifier, he's not one I would use there. I would probably take like the longest price of the big four, whether Rally Cry, Sunny Ridge, Conquest Big E, or Shaggoff. I mean, I would probably just literally take the one who's the longest and let the other ones kind of protect me with short prices.
I hear you. Yeah, it's Conquest Big E for me as well. I think you mentioned in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he was close to a hot pace there that kind of collapsed. In the last race in the Holy Bull, he was off and trying to rally into a really slow pace where he had no chance. He actually kind of made a middle move before Mohaymen and Greenpoint Crusader and Fellowship kind of, the race spread out a little bit. I think Mike kind of had a tepid ride with him in that race. I think Jose is going to be a lot more aggressive, and he's the one I'd look to play in here. Well, we only have about 5 more minutes, and we got a couple races to cover, so we'll kind of do quick scatter shot with them. The next one is Gulfstream Park, race 12. It is the Mac Diarmida. Is that how you say it? Another short field, only 7 in this one, but it's an interesting one. What was Jonathan? You haven't started yet. Where did you land in this race?
I don't land on Twilight Eclipse. I have a contract to never bet him.
He's an underneath key.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, he always hits the board. I'm interested in Grand Tito. I'm a sucker for second off and layoff. I just feel like the horse is going to improve. The only big question mark there, I think a lot of times with these turf races we ignore, is he's never really run this far. He's been a mile and a 16th type, and that's a significant difference. And that can either help him or hurt him. I'm going to go with maybe that it's going to help him second off a break. I think he'll be a good enough price, so I'll definitely look there a little bit. And whatever you do, you look at the morning line. Sometimes I think we skip over 3-1 shots. At least I do. And I think the big hoss is obviously live, and with Flo up, like I said the other day, if Flo's on a turf horse, I'm using. So somewhere between those two for me.
I like it. Jack?
Florent gave the big hoss just an absolute perfect trip last time at Sam Houston, and I guess you're supposed to play against perfect trips like that. So, I'm leaning Mr. Maybe. His only 2 starts for Chad Brown in that barn have been, on the stretch out, have been really, really impressive. His last was amazing. Yeah. I kind of expect him to even go off favorite in here if he's doing well and working well. I would lean on him and pick 4s for sure.
Yeah, I think it's Mr. Maybe for me. Chad Brown, horse has done nothing wrong. He's taken some time with this one. I think he's your most likely winner, but I don't know what kind of price in a short field you're going to get. All right, let's move on to the last of the 4 races. We only have a couple minutes left. It's the Fairgrounds Race 9. It's the Lacombe Memorial Overnight. I'll start because there's a horse in here I like and is going to be a nice price. Number 7, Scat Me If You Can. It's done nothing wrong on the turf. Last couple efforts on the wrong surface and the wrong distance. That race in the Rags to Riches came back way too hot. She was up on a hot place that collapsed. I think she gets a good trip and is overlooked, and I'd be looking at her to spice up things at a big price. Jonathan?
Yeah, I picked the race.
Or Jack, go ahead.
I threw her in the mix for sure. I actually liked another price horse in here, Mike, the number 11, More Than Most.
Yeah.
She had just an unbelievable trip last time, wide both turns, made a huge middle move, gets a jock change tomorrow. So I took a shot with her on Public Handicapper.
Yeah, that was an interesting race last out where there were some wide moves and yeah, she had a little bit of an eventful trip. I think she's not without a shot either. Jonathan, where'd you land here?
Oh, this is one of those typical I can't control myself. When I see a horse that I think is going to clear, like Tis Handful is going to clear, I have to play the horse. And the great part about it is I think the horse is going to probably get ignored a little bit because she drew the 13. But that's even better. Now I know the jock's going to go. I know he's going to send. I know I'm going to be clear. The 7.5 is always tricky. It's kind of a short run to the first turn. She'll be ignored on the board because she drew outside. And that's the type of horse that I want to try to get to wire this field. So I'm going to definitely play the 13. I love Jack's horse as well. If I'm playing 2 entries in a tournament, I'll probably go 13 and 11.
I love it. I'm glad you mentioned Tis a Handful because I get to mention her dam, Desert Stormer, winner of the 95 BC Sprint. Right there. That's some pedigree for you. All right.
She's fast.
She is fast. All right. Well, thank you, Jonathan, as always, for joining us. Jack, welcome. Thank you to the podcast for joining the podcast. It was a pleasure to have you on. Hopefully, we'll have you back again sometime soon. Good discussion today. And thanks a lot, guys. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you both soon.
Take care.
All right, absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. You've been watching the DRF Players Podcast. This is Mike Hogan, and until next time, thanks for joining.